I would say that there is a reason that this number is so high. I think everybody's expecting kind of a bounce back spot for Jamar Chase because if you've looked at him over the past 4 games, he has not reached this number. He's had some
Hmm.
relatively quiet games. Even last week, had 7 catches only for 43 yards. So I think what he's been lacking is like that long catch. Last time around against Baltimore, he had a 70-yard reception. So we need more of those. And with this secondary, I totally think it's in the realm of possibility, especially when you see a total of 52 and a half. This means it's usually a great game for props. Let's talk about the total for a second. This is one where we've seen some line movement. It was 50 and a half, maybe 51 and a half earlier in the week. Now at BetMGM, it's 52 and a half. It's 53 and a half at some spots. So, Jenks, are we expecting another back and forth affair? Will points be a plenty?
I think so. I'm hoping for, just from a viewing perspective, I want to see
Mm-hmm.
a shootout, but I think we will. And again, you can go back to what we saw earlier in the season in Cincinnati when there were 79 points in that game in an overtime game. And then you look at the Ravens secondary, and they have struggled. The Bengals can have success there. You look at the Bengals, they're not very good at stopping the run. So you can see why Derrick Henry, anytime touchdown, is minus 300. Way too juicy there, but the Ravens should be able to move the ball as well. You've got two quarterbacks playing as well as any quarterbacks in the National Football League. Joe Burrow has thrown for 20 touchdowns this season, 4 interceptions. Lamar Jackson, believe it or not, has been even better. 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So I can absolutely see a game where you see two MVP caliber quarterbacks back and forth. Whatever you can do, I can do better, that kind of game. And be it in prime time, I know sometimes prime time games tend to go to the under. I just don't see it here. Also, the Ravens are the best over team in pro football. They are 8-1 to the over thus far. So, again, I think we see a shootout, and I'm going to the over.
Yeah, it's wild how the identity of this Ravens team has really changed from in the years past, where we thought of this as a defensive minded team. You think of like all the legendary Ravens that played on the defensive side, Ray Lewis and company. But
Mm-hmm.
with Lamar Jackson this year and this offense, it's been an offensive juggernaut and a team that is in track meets with just about everybody. So the other thing I want to talk about, Zay Flowers. I know we just talked about Jamar Chase for quite some time, but quietly, Zay Flowers is putting together like one of the best stretches of any receiver in the NFL. If you look at his last 5 games, he's had 111 receiving yards or more in 4 of those. Last game had 5 catches for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. So tonight, his receiving prop is 59 and a half. It feels very low. And I understand he doesn't get quite the juicy matchup against, a secondary like the Ravens,
Mm-hmm.
but still, last time around, had 111 yards, 7 catches on 12 targets. He has become the number one receiver for Lamar Jackson, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like he goes over this number. So, tack this to the list. I feel like we're getting like a CVS receipt of bets for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, when you have a high total, I think it's a great game for props, and I think Zay Flowers has another big game.
I think so too. And I think we could be seeing, I think there's a possibility that we're seeing the light come on for Zay Flowers. And maybe he
Mm-hmm.
becomes, I don't want to say a superstar, but one of the more elite receivers, one of the better receivers in the NFL. We're already seeing that, but I think he can take it to the next level. Against the Commanders a few weeks ago, he was unbelievable, and we were looking at each other like, Zay Flowers, wow. He's starting to do this now on a more consistent basis. And let's remember, this is what, his second season in the NFL? He was a rookie last year, I believe, out of Boston College. So it takes some time to acclimate to the NFL, and now maybe he's acclimating. The game is speeding or slowing down for him. And when that happens, all of a sudden you see guys start to become the player that teams wanted them to be when they were drafted. And he certainly had plenty of talent in college, and maybe he's going to be that guy now. And I say that because since he hasn't quite gotten there yet, like he's not really in the conversation when you talk about elite receivers in the NFL. But if he's on his way there, you tend to find value on guys like that as opposed to Jamar Chase. We know that casual bettors are going to be all over Jamar Chase because he's Jamar Chase. But when it comes to a guy like Zay Flowers, who hasn't quite reached that level of success just yet, because you don't have that name recognition and that value, sometimes you can find value on guys like that. And I think this is a situation where you can find it here.
Yeah, I'm hoping so at least,
Hmm.
because I'm going to be taking his over tonight. The one thing that stands out to me when I see Zay Flowers is he has an absolute baby face, where he's 24, which is young, but
Hmm.
like we see other guys across the league that are this age, it's their prime. He's got this baby face, and it kind of makes me say, oh, that's the guy that has been torching defenses for over 100 yards. But sometimes it's just the way your face is built. But either way, I'm expecting a really good game tonight.
I know they added Tre'Davious White. Does that really make a difference here? I mean, he certainly has that Pro Bowl caliber resume, but has been not been the same since a couple of injuries. So how much does that move the needle?
I think if you look at the compensation, it kind of says a lot, right? They
Right.
they gave up a 2026 seventh round pick. They get a 2027 seventh round. They gave up nothing for Tre'Davious White. Tre'Davious White, in my eyes, is a lottery ticket. We know a few years back in Buffalo, he was a really, really good football player. He's not expected to play tonight, obviously, because they just traded for him 2 days ago. I'm not looking at him to be the savior by any means. I think a lot of it's internal. And
Hmm.
Marlon Humphrey, he was extremely outspoken Monday. Zach Orr has come under fire a lot locally, maybe a little bit nationally, taking over for Mike McDonald because they were the best secondary in football last year, the best pass defense in football last year when you look at a lot of metrics. And now it's just an utter collapse. And the players got to figure it out. There's still a lot of talent in the back end. And Marlon Humphrey, you drafted Nate Wiggins, Brandon Stevens, Kyle Hamilton. We know what he is, but the Ravens aren't really getting anything out of their free safety position. Marcus Williams was benched a few weeks ago, and then Eddie Jackson started in his place. Then Eddie Jackson was a healthy scratch against Denver. So the free safety position has been, kind of a huge downer on this defense.
All right, so we're a betting show, and if I'm remembering correctly, you've given us some winners when you've come
Yeah.
on and done these spots. So, from a prop perspective, from a side or a total, is there anything that you feel strongly about in tonight's game?
Yeah, I have a few. We already touched on the Zay Flowers. I'm
Mm-hmm.
shocked that the Lamar Jackson passing yards number is as low as it is. Like 230 and a half. I would almost even alt line that to 250. You could get plus 120 at BetMGM. Lamar's thrown for over 275 yards in 5 straight games, which is a franchise record for the Ravens. And something that's also very telling, watching that Broncos game, Lamar Jackson had no intention of running in that football game. He was listed on the injury report, back and knee injury, didn't practice Wednesday and Thursday. Clearly, that was still hampering him. So I wouldn't expect Lamar to be running a ton tonight. I would expect him to be throwing the ball a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens come out throwing the football. Also, Mark Andrews, 43 and a half yards. I think this is a big Mark Andrews game. Isaiah Likely is already ruled out. The Ravens tight ends had a field day against Cincinnati in that first game. Andrews went over that total. Likely had 2 touchdowns. The Ravens' third tight end, Charlie Kohler, he had a 55-yard reception in that game and a touchdown. I would think Mark Andrews could have a big day. And someone I'm looking at on Cincinnati's side, he didn't do much in the first game, but the Ravens' defense has really struggled against tight ends this year. I could see Mike Gesicki go over his total of 50 and a half yards. He had 100 yards last week. And like I said, the Ravens defense, in terms of passing yards allowed over the middle of the field, a ton, and a ton of yards given up to the tight ends.